Support for Lab Out Loud is provided by NSTA, the National Science Teaching Association. Find out more about what NSTA has to offer at nsta.org. You're listening to Lab Out Loud, science for the classroom and beyond. And in this episode, we're taking a look at options for kids to do science at home and the important things we need to consider.
Each individual situation is different and teachers may be facing real equity differences. So you also need to think about the potential limitations that students might face at home. So if you do an activity where they need lots of space, do they have room to throw a paper airplane, or is the activity too noisy for everyone around? That's when it comes to teachers, they know their students, right? They know what they can expect from them and they know their personal circumstances, and so they can also know which activities might work for them and which are not.
That's up next on Lab Out Loud, but first, I'm your co-host Dale Basler.
And I'm Brian Bartel. As our listeners might recall, we're doing a little arc about science at home. So as we're looking for guests that might be able to talk about this, I found a resource that has actually been doing this for quite a while. It's called Science Buddies. It's a nonprofit organization that supplies free hands-on STEM resources for educators in the classroom and children at home. So when I started looking at this, they were featured in the Scientific American piece called Bring Science Home, and a lot of the lessons were actually pre-pandemic. So we wanted to find out a little bit more about this resource and when it all started.
Science Buddies has actually been around since 2001.
That's Dr. Ben Finial.
I'm a senior staff scientist at Science Buddies, and I develop content like instructions for hands-on science activities and lesson plans for our site. And I would have to double check when the partnership with Scientific American started. It wasn't quite that early, maybe late 2000s or early 2010s. And again, even pre-pandemic, there's been an audience of parents who are interested in doing science at home with their kids, or activities that maybe you're not literally doing at home, but you're doing in a summer camp or an after-school setting. So general out of school, not in the science classroom. So there's was definitely a market for activities like that pre-pandemic. And then, of course, when the pandemic hit, now all of a sudden you had parents switching to either homeschooling or pod schooling, or teachers who now needed to figure out things their students could do at home instead of in the classroom. Then a lot more people started utilizing those resources.
Also joining the conversation is Dr. Svenja Lohner.
I am a scientist with a background in chemistry and biotechnology. I'm originally from Germany, which you can probably tell from my accent. And I came to the US about 12 years ago to do my postdoc at Stanford. Now I'm a senior staff scientist at Science Buddies. I just wanted to add that these activities were meant to be basically a bite-sized science activity for, like Ben said, parents at home that they can do with the kids on a rainy day. That's just 30 minutes with materials that you already have at home. So no big hassle. So kids can do science at home, and science can be integrated into their daily lives, and parents have something to do with their kids. Yeah, and we have definitely, I can't speak to the actual numbers for the Scientific American activities because we don't have them yet, but I can talk a little bit about the numbers or the data that we have on the resources that we have on our website, which also include the Scientific American activities. And the pandemic definitely has shown a shift in how users use our resources. And since the pandemic started, we have seen actually a triple the traffic to the activities that we have, which are short, like I said, and less structured, has tripled. Whereas the individual science projects that we have that are a little longer and tailored to science fairs have actually dropped in traffic sharply. So definitely there is a big increase in users that are interested in doing shorter activities and doing activities at home or in the classroom. Yes.
So as I'm looking through the Scientific American pieces, I'm looking at one specifically right now called Curl Metals with Heat. And we can talk about it. There's a couple of things that I want to talk about. But yeah, it looks great. I mean, I want to try it right now. But I have a few things going through my head. But one of them is that as I'm looking through this, and I know teachers, I work with teachers, it's pretty kid-friendly. Like, you could easily supply this link to a kid in, let's say, like some kind of like a Google Classroom or another LMS like Canvas or something, and then basically this is your instructions. Instead of having to redo a lab or make a new lab, it's ready, set, and go. Is that kind of the intent there?
Yes, the activities should basically be everybody can use them. Teachers can just pick them as they are, integrate them into their lessons, and it provides students with a little or teachers with a little background information about what is the science behind the activity, and then it has a preparations part where it says what materials do you need, how do you have to set up your experiment, and then it goes step by step through how the activity is done. And it actually also provides like thought questions. It asks kids, so what do you observe? What do you think will happen? And then at the very end, because that's also important for kids, it explains what students should have observed and why they have observed something. So it's a full cycle activity from the beginning, the background, and then at the end with the science explanation, what actually has happened. And it provides some additional resources that they can check out if they're interested a bit more about this topic.
Fantastic. I assume that this is set up similarly for Science Buddies?
Yeah, the activities are almost one-to-one the same, yeah.
One thing I'll add, sorry, Svenja, Science Buddies, we do also have a YouTube channel with a lot of videos for the activities. They are not, so usually if you look at the activity on the Science Buddies website, the video will be embedded there, or you can just go to the YouTube channel separately. Scientific American, the format for their website, they kind of like to have one illustration at the top, but they didn't want to put videos there. So sometimes, a picture is worth 1,000 words, and sometimes a video is worth 1,000 pictures, or whatever the saying is. So some of the very visual activities are a lot easier to show, especially if students are working from home, where normally the teacher would demo something. Anyone who's tried teaching over Zoom probably knows that trying to physically hold something up to your webcam to show it to people can be difficult. So having a video that the students can just watch on their computer can be helpful in some cases.
But teachers have gotten a lot better with some of those skills. We have to mention their game for working with technology has gone up significantly. So we want to give you credit for that too, teachers listening.
I think I'm looking at the graphics too. I looked up who was credited, George Retzik, all these drawings. It looks like you started doing the drawings several years ago, but they're great.
The pictures at the top of the Scientific American article.
Yes.
Yeah, so that's an illustrator that they contract with.
So what usually happens, we provide a picture of how the experiment actually looks like, or how the result looks like, or how the setup looks like, and then the designer or the graphic designer just took that image and miraculously made it into this absolutely beautiful graphic.
Is it exciting to kind of get them back to see how it was interpreted?
It's really cool. And they also have this little sneak preview sentence underneath, which is also pretty cool.
Well, some of them show abstract things too, like little cross sections and things like that. So that's not a real picture. You must maybe give them some diagrams and they kind of go with it.
Yeah, we'll have some back and forth, or kind of an email description of, or for the things where there's I really needed a video to show this, and now the illustrator needs to somehow show it in a still image. We'll kind of give them a description of what we intend to show.
Or things like enzymes that you can't really actually see. So they have to be creative in coming up with something that is appealing and shows the actual process and not,
How long's that process like with Scientific American, the back and forth? Do they give you feedback on how this will translate for their audience, or?
Usually it's we had a long-standing partnership with them where we were doing, these were literally weekly. So we were sending them 52 a year. And they did have an editor on their end who would look through the text and usually kind of publish it, after doing some light copy editing. If there were some bigger issues or about something they didn't think the audience would understand, we'd have a little more back and forth. But we didn't, there weren't multiple iterations of the illustrations usually.
Not to dive too deep into the specifics of the Scientific American, but I'm also noticing it's translated in Arabic.
I saw that.
Is there a reason for that? Is that
that I did not know. That would be
me too.
Yeah, that would have been up to the editors of, again, I guess to clarify, Scientific American and Science Buddies as two separate organizations in a partnership. We each have our own website and editors and people in charge of the site. So, I would assume that, the magazine must have had a large enough readership in that language to.
But other articles aren't. That's the thing. It's, if I click on other articles, it looks like it's just the content here. It's just a curiosity more than anything. A lot of these look like they have staying power. Like they're not going to age out because, that was so 1980s or something like that. I'm assuming, right?
So we have, with Science Buddies, we kind of try to do both. Like we have the classic physics, chemistry activities that have been around for a while, but then we also try to do more cutting edge things like drones, COVID-19 activities like washing your hands or how does a mask work. So I guess kind of trying to cover both bases, have some of those classic things where, you can still sit down and do this 10 years from now and it's going to be just as relevant, but also things that kids might be more interested in because they're hearing about it in the news now, or it's kind of a more trending topic.
Got it. When we started this season, our first episode was talking about safety and especially extending safety to home if you're going to do a science at home. We've also talked about how, we need to be cognizant of what materials might be available to students, and especially in a pandemic when we're not encouraging students to go out and pick up things in the store. We wouldn't want to have an assignment say you need to go buy sugar or something if that's not available. Now, you didn't have that in your head, of course, when you were making these before the pandemic, but you definitely had safety in mind. How did you address that?
Yeah, I would say that I can totally see that safety is a concern for schools and teachers when it comes to doing hands-on science at home. And there are schools that specifically told students not to do any hands-on science at home due to safety concerns. So I see, like, for me, safety starts with thinking about student independence. So you have to ask yourself, for each activity you write or that you want to do at home, are your students going to need to do these activities unsupervised? And if yes, which probably every parent will be thankful for right now, then you might want to keep the materials really simple and safe. So maybe paper, scissors, or tape are your best choices then. But then for older students, they might be old enough and responsible enough so they can clean up their own mess, or they can clean up a kitchen experiment that involves baking soda and vinegar. And then, I think safety comes back to lots of material choices. And also another thing that I want to add that is crucial for doing science at home is the activity instructions. And we have talked about this before a bit. The instructions you give and you write when you write the activity have to be really very clear, because if students do a hands-on activity at home, they not only need to know what they need to do, but also how to do it. So that's where our video content comes in, that actually demonstrates each step of an activity. And when we write lesson plans, we also include worksheets as additional support that guides students through the hands-on exploration. And these resources not only reduce the risk for students to use any materials inappropriately, they also make sure that the students can complete their project successfully and also independently. Because if kids are at home doing science and fail over and over again, they are really disappointed.
Mm-hmm. We've had interactions with students who cry when they can't get something as simple as a typing lesson to work, and so I can see that happening with that.
Yeah, it's important to consider that. So you have to also provide or offer students something that they can successfully do, because if they just try, they don't have any support at home, which might happen, then they just give up, and that's the least you want, that kids get frustrated with science. So, and
normally in the classroom, you might have a teacher that's over a student's shoulder to kind of help them along, or re-task or change direction if needed. But you may not have that at home as easily.
It sounds like, as everybody on this call, is aware, if you have kids at home who are doing online school, or in my case, kids aren't school age yet, and you have one or two parents trying to work online, like everybody's juggling Zoom meetings, the parent isn't necessarily there to help. So, a lot of the, getting back to your earlier question about how you adjust for this, a lot of these activities may have been written as a family activity. So you have a parent who's sitting there with a younger child kind of helping step by step. But now if the activity involves boiling water or using a knife or something you wouldn't trust that child to do unsupervised, then you might need to kind of recalibrate the age range it's appropriate for, since you're not going to have that direct adult supervision because you assume the parents are occupied elsewhere.
Sure.
Yeah, I need another aspect that I want to add, which is important when considering kids or students doing science at home, is that you also need to think about the potential limitations that students might face at home. Could be space, for example. So if you do an activity where they need lots of space, do they have room to throw a paper airplane, or is the activity too noisy for everyone around? Because each individual situation is different, and teachers may be facing real equity differences. So that's when it comes to teachers, they know their students, right? They know what they can expect from them, and they know their personal circumstances, and so they can also know which activities might work for them and which are not. So
you can also put a positive spin on that, because they're generally say we might be hesitant to write activities that require certain weather or doing something outside, because we'd say that doesn't apply as broadly to a national audience because you have people in wildly different climates. But if you're a teacher, then that can help. We just said earlier, Svenja has people with a leaf blower outside and we're all shoveling snow. So for us, maybe something that requires students leaving something outside to freeze overnight is great, because we know we live in that climate, right? Whereas that's not going to work for someone in Svenja's school district. So, there are those limitations about space and things, but then there are also things that may work better.
I guess a way to get around that is also giving kids options, right? So instead of saying everybody has to do this activity, you can say, hey, here's a list of activities. You can choose the one that fits your interests and your materials that you have at home and your constraints. And that is a flexibility that is really appreciated by kids and parents, especially right now in the pandemic, where you don't want to go out and buy certain things. And for that reason, we at Science Buddies, we pulled together a number of collections for teachers that include hands-on activities for specific topics like chemical reactions or kinetic energy, or themes like winter or holiday activities. So these are great for teachers if they are looking for topic-specific activities that they need to do with their students, and be it at home or in the classroom. So giving choices helps getting around all these limitations that might be there.
Have you gotten any feedback from parents during this time?
Go ahead.
We have most organizations, we also have social media, so Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, all that stuff, and usually the feedback there is more informal, like, oh, this is great, or I did this with my kids and it was fun. We do get more formal feedback from teachers in a survey that we send out periodically, looking for more specific things, and there we will we usually get very thankful things from teachers who I was looking online for resources and I found this, and this is great, this is exactly what I needed. And I think even more so again during the pandemic, for people who had to adapt, if you had a curriculum that was based on something you were doing in the class as a group with 20 people, and you needed to either look for something new or figure out how to adapt that to work with everybody now at home.
I would say we can indirectly also make assumptions based on the user traffic or how many people actually use certain activities. So, for example, we have seen specifically during the pandemic that everybody's interested now in pandemic-related activities that explain some COVID-19 related science. So these are very popular at the moment. So we know there's an interest out there, and we know that teachers are using them in the classroom. And we also know that engineering challenges, for example, that are always a big hit in the classroom or at home, because they're not only fun and engaging for kids, but they also teach students how to solve problems and using the engineering design process. So, so that these are things that we know, from the traffic we have on our website, we know that people are actually actively using these activities or these specific activities right now.
Is there I'm sure safety aside, so like certain things can't go home, that kind of thing, but is there certain activities that you've learned that just don't translate well as an at-home activity?
I would say that there are some that literally just don't work at home because they require a team or a group.
Oh,
so there
sure.
are some things that are written where you have students getting up and walking around the classroom into some simulate something, or so that just physically does not work when there's only one of you. And then there are a lot of fun ones that do require slightly more specialized materials that you would need to order something online or run to the hardware store, which again people are less likely to do. So
Sure.
I'm in I didn't mention at the beginning my background's engineering and robotics, so lots of things with magnets and batteries and copper wire and motors and that sort of stuff that again normally is really fun if you can get your hands on the materials, but I think people are just probably less likely to do that type of activity during the pandemic.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I guess talking what you can't do, I also want to say that in biology or molecular biology, biotechnology, this is also a field where you're pretty much limited by what you can do at home, because we do have activities that deal with bacteria and where you can make them glow and stuff, but then we come back to the safety where you also have to think about how to dispose certain things. If you talk about gene editing, which is a hot topic right now, and that we have.
So you don't have a take-home CRISPR kit, is what you're saying?
Actually, you're surprised. There are take-home CRISPR kits, and we actually do have an activity that talks about CRISPR. But you can get around this by, I wrote an activity where kids are actually looking into the CRISPR mechanism, and then their task is to make a stop-motion animation how the CRISPR mechanism works. And that's another way of how they can learn it, and that's something you can do at home and actually super fun. So you have to get creative of how to teach certain things and how to make them interesting at home.
I was thinking that there would be certain topics that might just be too abstract to do at home without that, scaffolding of a teacher there with them, if their parents couldn't do that for them. So, but it doesn't sound like you're shying away from anything.
I'd say most of our content is all designed to be hands-on to begin with. So, we don't have any pure kind of worksheet or reading type assignments.
Yeah, I wasn't thinking that, but I would think there could be a hands-on thing where there's got to be the, a conception of something that you're not seeing or can't get your hands on, but it's still in front of you or taking place in front of you.
Yeah, sometimes we get around, for activities, we just direct them to external resources, like watch this video that demonstrates how the CRISPR mechanism works. And then they use that external resource, and with that knowledge, then they can continue and do the activity that we write for them or that's there. So you kind of have to get creative and basically patch together things that work. And then most of the times you can get something that will work.
Okay.
Well, I'm on the Science Buddies website, and obviously there's more than just take-home activities. There's an interactive, the Sim Pandemic, and then there's science news that looks more geared towards a younger level, for instance. Tell us more about the resources that you have collected here.
So, again, Science Buddies, when we started way back in 2001, we were actually very geared specifically towards science fairs. And
there's a piece of that at Science Projects, right?
So, and over the years, we have branched out into a lot of those other resources you just mentioned. So there's the more formal science fair projects. There are these short activities we've been talking about most of the time, designed to do at home. Classroom lesson plans that are NGSS. I'm assuming most of the people listening to this podcast know what NGSS is, but Next Generation Science.
We would hope.
For those who don't. So Next Generation Science lesson plans that, again, were originally written assuming in-person learning, but we've added a little note to many of those and how you could adapt them for remote teaching. The Sim Pandemic tool you mentioned is new. It's a simulator that lets you simulate the course of a pandemic and tweak all the different underlying parameters. So I think R naught is the big one that people know about. How transmissible is the disease, but then things like social distancing and mask wearing and all that stuff. And it shows you these cool little graphs about how the pandemic would play out. So that lets students actually kind of understand the effects of all these different things they might be hearing about in the news. So that was a new thing we just launched last year. And then there's associated curriculum that goes along with that. So Svenja, did I miss anything there?
Yeah, I want to say that or add that We also have something we call the topic selection wizard. So we found that many kids, when they have to do science at home, they sometimes just struggle with what do I actually want to do, what I'm interested in. So this is a neat tool where they can just go through a set of questions about their preferences of do you like being in nature or not, or do you like playing computer games and stuff like that. And then based on all these questions, the recommender recommends them some activities they can do or some science projects they can do. So kids are not so overwhelmed with, oh man, there are so many things to do out there. What is the right thing for me? And then I also, I want to add that I said that engineering challenges are very popular in the classroom, also at home. So we also developed engineering challenges, online challenges that are free and open for all K-12 students around the world. And we even have $1,000 prizes that teams can win for their school. So teachers can bring the challenge at home to their kids so they can build virtual teams, and every year it's a different topic. So I think this year Ben, remind me, what are they? Oh yeah, they're doing a tower.
This year's building a tower. So this is, it's called the Floor Engineering Challenge. So we've mentioned, partnerships with different organizations. Floor is a company we partnered with for the last 5 or 6 years now to run this challenge where this has always been done remotely and worldwide. So this is actually something that worked very well with the pandemic, where previously we would have some kids entering as individuals or some homeschool kids entering, and then some teachers would have, 10 groups of 2 or 3 students all enter. But now everybody can just do it at home and still enter the contest. And it's usually some sort of kind of paper and cardboard engineering type project, low cost materials to make it accessible. And that's been very well received.
I love this topic, selection wizard, because you this is you must have got some real feedback here to make this, because it's describe yourself. Are you the student, adult for somebody else, or adult for themselves? But my favorite is, when is the science project due? And there's a drop down. First one tomorrow.
That definitely. If students have to do a last minute project, they can do it in a day. Yeah, I'm done.
Yes. And then there's another section.
Procrastinator.
That's awesome.
Browse the projects on our site. That's one of the top level fields. Is how long does this take?
Yeah.
Because if you can't do a science project on growing plants that's due tomorrow, right? Or material. If you need to order the materials, and there's going to take a few days. Where was
this when my kids were little? Do you enjoy gardening or working with plants? No. Okay, this is excellent.
And teachers use it quite a lot to just
get the juices flowing.
Interested. Yeah, right. So just to let them find out what interests them, what they want to do. And we also have lots of career resources, so then they can go after they have done a project, and each project actually connects to careers. So that's another link. So teachers also use our career resources, so they can learn about what they want to be later. And if they're interested in biotechnology, then how does a day in the life of a biotechnologist look like? So these are all neat things that teachers can do.
I notice you can sign in too. You have a login. Is that for students and teachers?
Correct. So some of the you can log in, you can favorite things, and save your favorites and print things. And then some of the lesson plan resources are only accessible to teachers. So answer keys and that sort of thing.
Oh yeah.
But all the accounts are free, so you don't actually. There's no. It's all free.
And I think we mentioned this earlier, but we're a nonprofit, so there's no sketchy selling your data or anything like that. It's just for kind of internal account and user information and stuff. But there's no sign up for a free account, but then we're going to bother you to pay for the premium version later or anything. It's actually free.
Sure. Awesome.
So before we let you go, what are your plans for the future? And has the pandemic kind of forced you to shift your focus or change how you do things?
Yeah, I think, obviously we all hope COVID-19 goes away, but I think some of the changes to science education are not going to fully go away. We might just have more people who, even when their kids are all back in school, they, enjoyed doing science activities at home and want to keep doing them, or teachers who found these resources and really like having videos and they still want to show videos in the classroom, even though, the students aren't watching from home anymore. So I think it's to just continue creating resources that are flexible to, our mission has always been, whether it's in the classroom or homeschooling or after school, summer camp, science museum, all of those different scenarios where you can do hands-on science. We don't want to be locked into one. We want it to be flexible. So hopefully we don't get hit by another pandemic, but the goal is to create resources that can be used in all those different scenarios.
Yeah, you were almost shovel ready in a sense. Like we're ready to deploy these.
Yeah, Svenja, do you have anything on kind of more future plans stuff?
Yeah, we already have about 200 lessons, I think, and we have started pulling lessons in from other resources besides Science Buddies through partnerships. But we're also writing tons ourselves, so they keep on coming.
Awesome.
Well, thank you so much for your time. I'm glad I always love to see these new resources that I wasn't aware of. So I'm happy to share these out, and I'm hoping that some of our listeners are going to put them to good use. Okay,
yeah, I'll throw in one last plug. We do love feedback from teachers. So, if you use one of our projects with your student, we have a full-time communications person who does all our social media and our blogs. So she writes up things about classrooms. Or if you have a problem, right? If you tried something and say, hey, these directions weren't clear, or my students didn't understand this part, then we'll fix it. So we love hearing back from people either way.
Yeah, as a teacher, you can also register or sign up for a weekly newsletter that lets you know everything that's new and things that are coming up, like the Floor Engineering Challenge or stuff like that, and use thematic collections or new cross-cutting concepts like lesson plans. So that's available for teachers.
Well, fantastic. Thanks again for your time, and we wish you the best of luck in the future.
Okay. Thanks so much. It was a pleasure talking to you.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Lab Out Loud. If you'd like to learn more about some of the things discussed in this episode or previous episodes, you can find show notes at our website, laboutloud.com. If you have a guest idea or a future topic that you'd like to see on Lab Out Loud, go to our contact page and send us a message. Also, you can subscribe to Lab Out Loud on your favorite podcasting app, such as Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, or wherever you like to find podcasts. While you're there, leave us a review and rating. Your input helps others find our show. Thanks again for listening.